Professor Laurent Olivier is a French archaeologist, professor of archaeology at the Université de Paris, and conservator of Gallic antiquities at the Musée d'Archéologie nationale in Saint-Germain-en-Laye. He's the author of numerous books, essays, and articles about cultural history, including the book The Deep Abyss of Time. His newest work explores the relationship between the past and the present, focusing on native cultures, marginalized populations, and underserved communities. Laurent Olivier was born in February in the year 1958 in Versailles, France. Inspired by Gallic traditions, he decided to become an archaeologist at the age of 7. At age 17, he was hired onto a team to work on his first archaeological excavation in eastern France. This began his fruitful career as an archaeologist, focusing on Iron Age, Roman, and medieval sites, earning a doctoral degree from Cambridge University and a PhD degree from the University of Paris, the Sorbonne, where he still works now as a professor of archaeology. In 2008, he published a book called The Dark Abyss of Time, establishing his thesis that the past lives in the present time, examining its manifestations in current time. His work turned to examinations of World War II battle sites, and his focus became fixed on native populations affected by the machinations of empires and the colonizing effects of imperial cultures. In 2020, his interests in indigenous human culture brought him to create a new series of works, including a sculptural composition called Remember Wounded Knee, and his interest in Native American culture continues even today. He's working on two major projects currently. One is an ethnographical conservation of the memories from Lakota families and tribal members whose lives were affected by the 1890 Wounded Knee Massacre in South Dakota in the USA. The other project, parallel in some ways, involves excavation and identification of victims of the 1870 massacre in France of Free Parisians by government forces called the Paris Commune. We shall talk about these projects after a brief examination of his work and life until now. In his first decades as an archaeologist, Laurent Olivier focused on Roman and Iron Age inhabitants of eastern France, especially concentrating on a town called Marsal, where natural salt deposits provided a local industry that supported the population through the production of salt for trade. From its beginning as a local industry to its takeover as an industrial slave factory for the Roman Empire and to its latter-day monopolization by European capitalists and bankers, the salt works of Marsal have been and still are a home for indigenous French people who live and work there. His work has examined evidence of the interaction between these salt works and the lives of the people who made, distributed, and used the exported salt. Laurent Olivier conducted original excavations in Marsal, France, and for many years served as principal investigator at the site, working with colleagues and students, learning and teaching about people, industry, and the past, and its role in shaping the present time. He produced works which showed how the lives of the people were affected by the nature of the salt trade and how nature and humanity have interacted there since the years of the Iron Age. Laurent Olivier found evidence that the natives of the area, who were originally independent and relatively wealthy from their proximity to this natural resource, were enslaved by the Roman imperial culture and later victimized by capitalists who exploited the natural resources and the people of the region for profit and power. He was able to trace the impact of colonialist imperialism on the native peoples of France. Professor Laurent Olivier's emerging awareness of the need to conserve manifestations of native culture in this era of colonial imperialism led him to learn about and work with the people of the Lakota tribe in America, who had experienced horrendous mistreatment at the hands of the United States military. He has made contact with the Lakota people in America and has kept contact with them to this day, helping to preserve memories of their people and sharing awareness of Lakota culture around the world. In parallel with his interest in conserving native Gallic culture, Laurent Olivier has worked to make the public aware and conscious of human rights, anthropological imperatives, and cultural activism that maintains and nurtures native people and their natural character in this era of unrestrained global dominator culture, which Laurent Olivier, with his colleagues, refers to as the Anthropocene era. To understand the impact of cultural imperialism on native people, Laurent Olivier's work has memorialized injustices like the massacre at Wounded Knee, This needless massacre occurred when a U.S. military unit sought to confiscate guns from Lakota tribe members and families who were peacefully camped near a river in South Dakota. This attempted disarmament resulted in a horrific massacre that left only a handful of survivors. Lakota people living free beyond the authority of governmental policies were antithetical to the conformist colonizing cultural imperialists. The Lakota tribe was decimated, but they have survived. And today, members of the tribe remember and honor the memories of their ancestors and their sacrifices to maintain the right of freedom for Native people. Likewise, in Paris in 1870, free citizens refused to accept the rule of an invading army. Their corrupted capitalist government acceded to the invasion, and when the people of Paris refused to surrender their freedom and autonomy, thousands of them were seized by military forces, taken to the suburbs of the city, slaughtered by the military, and buried in unmarked pits. Now Laurent Olivier is seeking the sites of these burials, hoping to exhume the bodies, identify the remains, and connect them with their families who still hold them in memory, to keep alive their manifestations of the human need for living freedom in the face of imperialist aggression. Laurent Olivier has taken a strong stand, personally and professionally, against settler colonialism in all its forms, in his writings and speech, showing by his actions and proving by his own words that he believes free people should not be controlled, casting his lot with free people, anarchists, the ancient Gauls of France and the Native Americans, standing against imperialism and socioeconomic injustice for morality. As an anthropologist and historian, Laurent Olivier stands against injustice by impositions of socioeconomic power, advocating for a moral compass to guide the actions of nations, empires, states, and governments. Laurent Olivier believes in the real value of freedom and opposes settler colonialism. Here I would like to quote Laurent Olivier to illustrate his archaeological theory. He said, quote, "Archaeology is not about the past. Archaeology is about memory, about all the remains, by staying with us, after still building memory, as in constructing a memory of themselves. They are still acting on us. The statue is still alive." He also said, "We are worked by the past. I think things which have happened centuries of generations before us, but it's their way to remain alive, by being transformed, by being changed, by being interpreted by us." He said, "So it's pointless to look for the truth of the past. The past is only accessible from the present, since there is no other place than the present for the past. The past is in the present, past, present, future all together, not separated from each other. And this is precisely what a piece of art addresses as a question, because it is just that, a piece of art. Art and archaeology are able to create philosophy." The archaeological and artistic contributions of Laurent Olivier are recognizable in his transcendence of science to attain heights of morally inspired cultural activism. By breaking out of the box of science, denying or ignoring the restrictions against speculation, against the credentialed expertise of economically advantaged schools of thought, and by uninhibitedly engaging in political activism in his creative work and life, Laurent Olivier has taken a step beyond the new archaeology, which eschewed political thought and attempted to master the universe by documenting measurable facts. Perhaps this is easier for Olivier coming from the European traditions of archaeology, unruffled by the predations of Washington bureaucrats and funding preferences of American business, which dominates the landscape of American archaeology. In any case, he has dived unashamedly into the deep waters of social advocacy, embracing postmodern deconstructionism and showing that he believes being good is much more important than being scientific. Another quote by Laurent Olivier illustrates this thought. He said, "Herein lies archaeology's basic mission, its raison d'être, short of which it loses all meaning and itself becomes too an instrument for the destruction of memory. The province of archaeology is the here and now. What we study is what the present does to the world, and it is the advent of the Anthropocene that has taught us this. We can thus use presentism as a weapon with which to combat presentism itself, or at least what brought it on. Seen in this perspective, archaeology's lone vocation is that of resistance. It is a way to imagine a future other than the one toward which we're heading. It's another way of conceiving the world and a consciousness of the fragility of things, beings, and places. The work to be done is enormous. It falls to archaeology, by speaking in the name of that which is human, to offer resistance to the colossal power of Anthropocenic forces. His transcendence of science and archaeology is manifested in his artistic contribution, in which his study of the past and the present results in a reworking to suggest a reality that affects the future. This photograph of his sculptural construction, titled "Remember Wounded Knee," was created from the bones of American bison donated to his care for his work by the Lakota people. He has recontextualized them in this juxtaposition as a gallery exhibition for contemporary art museums, which he premiered at the International Museum of Contemporary Sculpture in Santo Tirso, Portugal in 2020. Here is another view of the sculpture "Remember Wounded Knee" to show its scope and character. And here are two other views to show the scale and nature of the sculpture. Natural life forms stand in concert to confront violently militaristic commercial political products. Placing himself consciously in the evolutionary flow of archaeological theory, Laurent Olivier had to say this about where it has come from and where it is going. He said, "We have now come to see the failure of the processualist and post-processualist new archaeologies of the latter half of the 20th century, all of which had as their fundamentally flawed aim that of reconstructing the past in itself as its own entity. Some thought that they could reproduce the structure or the functioning of long since vanished civilizations, while others sought to grasp, if not the way the people of these vanished civilizations perceived things, perhaps the way they behaved. Like the former archaeology from which it claimed it was breaking away, processualism and post-processualism said they were speaking in the name of the intrinsic truth of the past and of the reality peculiar to it. We have entered the age of presentism." Published in 2011 and available today in French and in English, Laurent Olivier wrote "The Dark Abyss of Time" to explain how the past remains alive in the present, continuing to affect reality, continuing its own existence, not gone, not having merely come before, but here now, inexorably exerting its influence. This idea that the past is alive, not gone, is central to his creative research in archaeology and art. Building on his work excavating battle sites of World War II in eastern France, Laurent Olivier published in 2012 "Our Ancestors the Germans, Archaeologists in the Service of Nazism." In 2023, Laurent Olivier published this book, "What Happened at Wounded Knee." His work of conserving the native Gallic culture of France continues in the tradition of free French people who have battled colonial imperialism since the days of Vercingetorix, who led the French people in battles against the Roman colonial imperialists. In Laurent Olivier's new project about the Paris Commune of 1870, when German Nazi armies overtook the city of Paris, he seeks to find, exhume, and reconnect the massacred Parisian people with their families and to document and publicize the effects of the massacre on the families of the people of France. And his work with the Lakota people also continues. Laurent Olivier travels to the Dakotas and meets with the Lakota people to ride with them in memorials for Wounded Knee and the Little Bighorn, collecting ethnographic memories and testimonies of Native people about their lives amidst colonial imperialism. And he shares with the public how the spirits of people persist through the depredations of invasion and imperialism. Here are some references if you would like to learn more about the work of Laurent Olivier. These range from articles about his work, to interviews with artists and others, to background information about the Native people with whom he's working. Also shown is a link to his publisher and a link to the museum where Professor Olivier works as a conservator of cultural antiquity. Thank you.